We pick up with telepathic historians of the species Yulians. We're seeing them demonstrate their abilities with Keiko. She recalls, through their coaching, seeing her grandmother writing with an ink brush when she was just a little girl. Watching this, it's hard not to think of those who claim they are using techniques to draw out old memories when actually they're creating memories. Your mind fills in a detail because you're asked for it to be filled in. Sadly, memory isn't like a video file that you can just go back and pull out as an objective recording of events. Still, being aliens using telepathy, we can make allowances that this is a different technique. Rules go out the window sometimes when an alien is poking around your brain.
You, madam, you're thinking about that first childhood kiss. Would you like to remember more about it?
Feel the probing of his tongue inside your mouth.
Father, you know you're not supposed to probe someone's memory unless they've given you permission.
You are right. But sometimes, with a beautiful woman, I cannot help myself.
You know, I wrote all that about rules going out the window before I actually watched this part. Suddenly I feel like I've accidentally made excuses for the creepy uncle that puts you on his lap and has wandering hands. Soon the teaser ends. You know, I don't like to rush to judgment, but I can't help but feel there's something sinister about this guy. After the titles, Geordi and Data discuss human memory, ultimately deciding that there is no pattern to how it works. Important or unimportant, good or bad, memory operates on the I'm all you've got, so you take what I frickin' give you and like it. That is, unless you don't want to be able to find your way back home tonight. At dinner, the Yulians explain that they're creating a museum to house all these memories, a way to recount history through individual experiences. Crusher pushes for Picard to have the process, but he seems about as enthused as suggesting they spend a vacation on Risa with Loxana Troy. Well, this guy is jonesing for the chance to probe them, going around the table practically begging them to let him go sifting through their brains, and has trouble taking no for an answer. Oh, and also he's very full of himself and, well, kind of an asshole.
Once Jev spent 2 days with a contingent of elderly Gentons. He couldn't get anything from them. I spent only 1 hour with them and retrieved a fragment from the Gentonian trade wars.
I've never seen anyone commit murder with a placemat before, but I think we're about to see how it's done. The schmuck finally leaves before the blowhard starts telling stories of his toilet training, and Troy heads out to check up on him. He says his father's insistence on demeaning him in public has gotten kind of old, and she says not to worry, her own mother's a bit overbearing as well. So she completely gets the whole my parent is embarrassing me on a stellar scale kind of thing. When she gets back to her quarters, she starts having strange visions, gradually piecing together her and Riker cleaning up after a poker game, her spilling the chips, and him wanting to make love to her despite the fact they're on the same ship now, so resuming their relationship just wouldn't be proper. But things get ugly when he starts forcing himself upon her, and his face turns into that of Jev, the Yulian guy with the asshole dad. In the end, we see her unconscious on the floor of her room and soon learn she's in a coma and can't be brought out of it. Well, they're going to have to investigate this, so Riker heads down to talk to Jev.
We talked. In a turbolift, briefly. She got out at deck 8. I did not go with her.
Jev, I'm not accusing you of anything.
This guy's too used to being accused if his reaction to the first question is, I'm not a stalker. Riker asks them to submit to a physical examination to rule out the possibility of some infectious organism. Riker then heads to sickbay and starts talking to Troy in the hopes that she might be able to hear him on some subconscious level. He rambles about their humdrum mission, personnel files, things that would only lull her into a deeper sleep if you ask me, until Dr. Crusher sends him off to bed. But then, in his quarters, he has visions now too. Visions of them sealing off the warp core while someone is trapped inside. Jev takes the place of one of the crewmen, the one pleading that she was right behind him. Don't close the door, and when Riker does, accusing him of killing her. Soon, Riker's found in a coma as well, and hauled off to sickbay to add to the growing pile. Picard wants Crusher to tell him what's going on. It's like every other week somebody falls into a coma around here. The alien takes over and they're knocked out. They get blasted by unknown energy and they're knocked out. And then the times when it doesn't happen, it's when she accidentally starts turning them into animals and Data's cat into a lizard. It's just chaos around here. Well, she says she's doing the best she can. It's like a certain syndrome, except they don't have the decreased histamine count that comes with it, so it can't be that. So Worf wants to just quarantine the Yulians. Well, Picard says no to that. There's no actual evidence saying they're responsible, so they might resent the implication that this is their fault. He tells Dr. Crusher to get to the bottom of this before anybody else comes down with this, and try not to turn anybody into a lizard again. The last thing we want to do is walk in there or assess sickbay by going, coma, 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 chameleon. There's some signs that whatever caused this coma is linked to changes in memory, the first evidence there is suggesting a connection to the Yulians. And after some talking, they agree they'll come by tomorrow morning so Dr. Crusher can do a more specific examination of each of them. In the meantime, she checks out Keiko, but the crazy thing is, the one that they definitely know had their memories tampered with shows no sign of any changes to her thalamus, which is what is seen in the two coma victims. LaForge is looking into this too, trying to detect anything on the ship that might have caused this, or even signs that it was here but is gone now. You know, like a chemical that caused it but then broke down over time so you don't pick it up anymore. Everything is a bust. He bangs his head onto this for hours until finally he goes down to tell Dr. Crusher, little knowing what's been going on while he's been doing that. Dr. Crusher had an episode. She's back to when Picard took her to see Jack Crusher's body after his accident. Picard is soon being replaced by Jev, as is Jack Crusher, and finally, she's in a coma too. You know, I don't like to pigeonhole people, but this guy's a real jerk. So Data joins LaForge when he goes to give his report that he can't find any evidence that would cause these comas. She is obviously not receptive to bad news right now, though. So the pair explain things to Picard then, and he figures maybe there were incidents on some of those 11 other planets that they'd been visiting before coming here. So while they check into that, he's going to go check on Troi because she's come out of it. Except she has nothing helpful to say about it. She can't remember anything after she started brushing her hair. So while he leaves her to recover, he has to have that awkward conversation with the Yulians, asking them to be confined. They've exhausted every single other possibility. There is no variable that they haven't been able to account for except for them. Well, as you can imagine, the big blowhard is indignant at the suggestion, but Jev says, hey, we specialize in retrieving memories. Why don't I retrieve Troi's memories so we can get to the bottom of this? Picard's reluctant, but the old lady is persuasive, so finally, Picard says he'll ask Troi what she thinks. While he asks her, LaForge has a breakthrough. They've been acting on the assumption that all the unexplained comas would be reported as unexplained comas. But what if they were misdiagnosed because they looked so similar to that condition that Dr. Crusher had actually ruled out? Doctors make mistakes all the time. I mean, just ask the people in the village fleeing when the monster lurches into town. Well, Troi does want to get to the bottom of what happened to her, so she agrees to have that memory probing thing done. Try to recall what happened. Which involves Jev heading back into her head to help her relive the night that, well, yeah, it's a whole new level of creepy.
I feel I'm in a therapy group being run by my own rapist.
She goes back and recalls the time with Riker, the happy memory intruded upon when he's replaced by someone else. But this time, it's not Jev, it's his father. And this is not an unconvincing argument. The guy is really pushy about wanting to get into people's memories, so it does already fit with preconceptions. Oh, and that doesn't even include that little bit about him saying, oh, well, if a girl is pretty, by all means, I should go poking around in her brain. After the commercial break, Jev tells Picard that the authorities on their planet are prepared to prosecute for this crime if they want to pursue it. This is something that used to occur centuries ago, but then it was abolished. The punishment for it is still on the books, though, and it's quite severe. So what does that mean? That Jev has gotten away with it. He's hit the grand slam. He's not only had the chance to mind-screw people for his own twisted pleasure over and over again, but now he's convinced all of them that his own crimes were in fact committed by the father who has always humiliated him. His victory is assured. There's nothing that could go wrong now, unless, of course, he were to be a complete idiot. So, let's see what the complete idiot does next.
You were so lovely.
I commend you for not licking her face. Well, when I say that there's no way to be undone, I meant strictly from his own perspective. As far as he was concerned, he'd gotten completely away with it. The only reason he's not going to completely get away with it, besides the fact that he is fucking up at this very moment, is because LaForge's approach has tracked the pattern of this guy's behavior, and it just doesn't match the journey of Jev's father. It only matches Jev himself. He starts on her yet again, but this time he's physically present, so she's able to fight back. And Worf arrives in time to belt him one. Good. All that leaves then is the coda, where Picard says that despite evolving as societies, we all still carry the capacity for violence within us, and it can take over if we were to let it. So there you have it. Star Trek dares to tell you that sexual assault is a bad thing. Post-episode follow-up. Annoying character goes to Jev. People like him, they're real assholes. That's my hot take. All scores are relative to their series. Final score for Violations is 4 out of 10. It's not bad, but TNG is typically better than this. FYI, I'm about to repeatedly use the 4-letter word for sexual assault. This is a show about rape, and that was a relatively brave thing, but what is most notable about it is that the show itself has nothing to say about rape. Unless Picard's final remark is that people who rape are just giving in to their capacity for violence, in which case he's saying very little. Thus, without anything to say about rape, the acts themselves must then be considered in light of the story that it has to tell, and that only. There's no message to the show. These are merely vehicles for the story that it's trying to say. And in that regard, the episode is just uneven. Troy and Dr. Crusher have very powerful, haunting visions, I'll grant you. Riker, which I can't help but notice is the only male, does not have those. There's no real sense that something personal is being trod upon here. Nothing that is intimately private that this voyeur is not exploiting for his own twisted pleasure, which is the case with the other two. The episode has potential for a psychological thriller, but unfortunately doesn't know how to properly deliver on that. I would think of Schisms, for a sharp contrast without atmosphere is vital to the work of selling the terror of the premise. Thus, Violations has some very powerful scenes, but it's a rather unremarkable story that's built around them.